An argument essay is one of the things you're going to write pretty consistently all the way through college. And it goes a little bit beyond the 5-paragraph essay model. The 5-paragraph essay is pretty much the standard for making sure you understand how to organize an essay. But an argument essay takes that same idea and then applies it just a little bit further. So there are 4 kinds of outlines for an argument essay. The one you might be the most familiar with is this one right here, the traditional argument. It has your introduction, 3 body paragraphs, an opposition paragraph, a rebuttal paragraph, and a conclusion. All right, now you may be going, what is this opposition rebuttal thing? The rest of that looks familiar, but I don't know what that is. And that's okay. We're going to look at that again in a minute. But let me first sort of go over the 4 types of variations of an argument, and then we'll come back around to opposition and rebuttal, because that is the place where students often are like, oh my God, what is that? All right, but in brief, so that I can continue on, in opposition are the points that other people would believe who aren't you, and then rebuttal is you saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, but, and then taking on your opposition's point of view. Now, so if this is your traditional argument, then another way of looking at sort of the same information but in a different way is to start with your opposition points. So instead of having them all the way down here, you start with those. And then what you do is you slowly take those opposition points apart. So really it's mostly all rebuttal. All right. Another way to think about this might be if you think about one of those lawyer shows where the prosecution lays out all of the argument. All right, so here is the proof that he killed his wife, he had the motive and the means and the opportunity, and the defense is going to say, oh, but there were mitigating reasons, and poor guy for killing his wife. But he's wrong because killing is always wrong. In conclusion, you need to put this guy away for life. Okay, so that's the prosecution argument. Now the defense argument is going to look at it the other way, right? The defense is going to say, okay, so you've heard from the prosecution that there was motive, mean, and opportunity, and that this guy killed his wife and what a terrible person he is, but there were reasons. All right, and so let me explain to you about the reasons. The wife was cheating on him. The wife was stealing all of his money. The wife was going to kill him first. In conclusion, you need to find this man not guilty. So different sides of an argument. All right, there are 2 other kinds of outlines. These are a little bit more advanced. All right, so you have an inductive argument, which says it introduces your issue, looks at both sides. So you look at one side and then so what? Look at the other side and then so what? And then in your conclusion, you're sort of saying, okay, now that I've looked at both sides, this is what I think. All right, which is why you're delayed thesis. Another kind of argument is a Rogerian argument. All right, and what it does is it starts with, here is the problem. All right, and this is how you are perceiving this problem. This is how I am perceiving this problem. All right, this is how we're both affected by it. This is your point of view. This is my point of view. Let me explain to you why you should see the argument my way. All right, here are some possible compromises that would help us be both successful. And then conclusion, here's my delayed thesis arguing for this is what we should do going forward. All right, so those are 4 basic ways to lay out an argument. Now let's talk a little bit about the argument thesis statement. All right, now you may have already learned about an informative thesis statement has 2 parts, what the topic is and then how you're going to talk about the topic. An argument thesis statement sort of falls under that same sort of outline. Basically, it's the same idea, the topic and then how you're going to talk about the topic. But for your deductive argument, this is my opinion, here's the reasons I'm right. A refutation argument might say, even though some people's opinions are different, this is my opinion and here's the reasons I'm right. An inductive argument is going to say, based on the evidence presented, this is my opinion. And then a Rogerian argument is going to say, given both sides' needs, this is the best compromise. So one is fairly bombastic, one is fairly defensive, one is more thoughtful, and then the last one, the Rogerian argument, is what's the best for everybody. And those are very different audiences that you're going to be writing for, and so you need to know who your audience is to help you determine what kind of argument you're going to be making. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that opposition thing again. All right, opposition points are positions that disagree with whatever your argument is. All right, you do always want to include those points. All right, because think about it if you've ever been in a fight. All right, if you've been in a fight, it's really handy if the other person telegraphs their punch. All right, and it's really good for you if somebody telegraphs their punch, because then you know what to do, like duck or block or parry or run away. At least that's what I would do. I'd run away. But if you know what they're going to come up with, then you know what to do in response. So as an argument goes, you want to know what the other side's point of view is so that you can respond to it effectively. All right. Now, opposition points aren't always bad. Just because they don't agree with you does not make the argument bad. Right? Often the other points of view do have a valid point, and so you want to look into that as deeply as possible, right? And make sure you understand both your point of view and the other point of view, and then maybe come up with something that is more balanced. So it should be well researched. Now when you get to the rebuttal section, that's the point where you get to examine the opposition points for both the good things and the bad things. Right? It's okay if you have a concession rebuttal where you say, okay, here are your point. That's a good point and that's valid. But okay, what about this? All right, so for example, Schnauzers are the best dogs because of their independence. Right? That's my opinion. Now somebody else is going to come along and say, yeah, independence is just another way of saying stubborn and hard-headed and refuses to do what you want. And so, yeah, that's fair enough, because Schnauzers are really cranky about not getting their way. But if you gain their trust, they're more willing to go along with you. So that's, yeah, you're right, but that's not all bad, and here's why. And so you might want to think about a good concession rebuttal. That's a fair statement to make, and it's well reasoned. And you want to show, as you go through college, well reasoned thoughts, not just off the cuff, I'm right, you're wrong, shut up. Because I'm right, you're wrong, shut up isn't going to get it in college. All right, so back to that thing about audience. When do you use which argument style? So you want to be thinking about your audience, just like if you're thinking about how do you approach your significant other or your parents with something that you want that their significant other or your parents don't want to give you. You have to figure out how to approach that person to get what you want. All right. Sometimes going at it straight isn't effective. Sometimes going at it straight is the only way to do it. All right. So you want to use a deductive argument when you're writing about a topic that most people agree with. You want to use a deductive argument usually for in-class writing, and partly because you are familiar with the 5-paragraph essay format and because that's something your teachers are looking for. All right. You can use the deductive argument when there isn't a lot of opposition points, when it's a topic that doesn't have a lot of feeling on both sides. Now, a refutation argument, it's really useful to start with the opposition if you're going to basically take sand out from underneath it. So if you're taking on the status quo, things that most people believe are to be true, and you're going to be turning that on its head and examining it and saying, maybe not, then a refutation argument's a really good strategy for that. Especially if there's a lot of opposition argument to go with, right? If you want to analyze an argument's basis, that's a good strategy. And this is often very much useful for, say, a rhetorical analysis. You want to use an inductive argument if you have a lot of conflicting data. Something about climate change is there's a lot of conflicting data and it all seems to be equally represented. It's a very complicated sort of topic. And so if you're looking at trends or conflicting data or opinions, then looking at one side and then looking at the other side and then making sort of a reasoned argument based on looking at both sides and the evidence is a good time to use your inductive argument. If you're making a logical leap from a lot of specific evidence, all right, that's a good thing to use an inductive argument for. Now, Rogerian argument is when you are trying to get somebody to come along with you and you want to show that it is in their best interest, all right, especially when you're trying to minimize conflict, would be a good time to use Rogerian argument. All right, it assumes that your audience are people of goodwill. All right, that they aren't going to come after you with pitchforks and fire because you disagree with their point of view. This is also super effective if you are writing or filing a complaint, or if you are trying to get somebody to refund your money. This would be a really good strategy for that. All right, so you want to do that when both sides have a stake in the outcome. If you're trying to build a compromise, particularly, for example, with parents or significant others, this is a super good strategy, a good argument, because it brings the other person along and the other person feels like he or she didn't lose anything. All right, and consensus and consent is super important in relationships.